Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Vegan Spirituality Online Gathering. My name's Lisa Levinson, and I'm the Sustainable Activism Director with In Defense of Animals, and I also helped to start this group, Vegan Spirituality. We do have in-person meetings across the country in different cities, and you can find out a little more about those groups on our webpage, which is veganspirituality.com. Also available on the IDA website at idausa.org/sustainable activism. We started this group to explore veganism as a spiritual practice, and that's what we do each time we meet the second Thursday of every month, and we bring in different leaders of the vegan spiritual movement. And today we have my co-host, Judy Carmen. She's the author of Peace to All Beings, and she will be introducing our featured guest today.
Hi, everybody. This is Judy, and I'm glad to be here. Glad you all have joined us. I think I got my phone fixed. If you were with us last month, it was buzzing, but I think it's fixed. And we are very excited to have Andrew Bear with us as our guest this month. He is an ordained lay student of Thich Nhat Hanh. He is the chapter leader for the Silicon Valley chapter of Dharma Voices for Animals also. Dharma Voices for Animals is an international Buddhist organization that speaks out when animal suffering is supported by actions of those in the Buddhist community. Andrew is a board member of the Silicon Valley Interreligious Council and organizes an annual memorial service for homeless people who died on the streets each year. Andrew also volunteers as a wildlife rehabilitator at the Wildlife Center of Silicon Valley and as a wildlife search and rescue responder with Wildlife Emergency Services. Andrew humbly hopes to use his life to protect living beings. He finds joy in practicing a vegan way of life, as every bite of food, every piece of clothing, and every mindful step becomes an act of compassion. I love that. Andrew works also, I don't know how he finds time, but he also works as a hospital chaplain, lives with his spouse, teenage son, 2 beautiful rescue shelties, 2 rescued hamsters, and any other animal friends in need of help. So, Andrew, we're so glad to have you. And everyone, Andrew told me he was going to start us off with a meditation. So we're just so blessed to have that. So if everyone's ready, Andrew?
Mm-hmm. Well, dear friends, thank you very much for the privilege of being here. Thank you to Lisa and Judy, and also the whole IDA community and all tuned in. It's a privilege to be in conversation about spirituality and veganism. I'd like to begin with the short mindfulness meditation. And in Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition, we often will meditate using short phrases that are said on the in-breath and the out-breath that serve to help focus our mind in meditation. So one line of it will be said on the in-breath and another line on the out-breath. So wherever you are, I could ask you to, you might want to sit comfortably with your spine straight, your shoulder relaxed. Perhaps you might want to relax your jaw, which holds a lot of tension, and just breathe normally. And whatever is more comfortable to you, you can leave your eyes open or you can close your eyes. So breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. So with the in-breath, you're aware that you're breathing in. And with your out-breath, you're aware that you're breathing out. just bring your attention to the in-breath and out-breath. Breathing in, my abdomen rises. Breathing out, my abdomen falls. So just bring your attention to the rising and falling abdomen with each in and out breath. Breathing in, I follow my in-breath from beginning to end. Breathing out, I follow my out-breath from beginning to end. So just follow your whole breath from beginning to end, all the way in and all the way out. Breathing in, I am aware of my body. Breathing out, I relax my body. Just become aware of your body and relax your body. Breathing in, I'm happy to be alive. And breathing out, I smile to life. So happy to be alive and smiling at life. So if your eyes are closed, you can, when you feel ready, you can open your eyes.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. That was just wonderful. So peaceful. I'm sure everyone really benefited from that. It's a beautiful practice. So, moving on, tell us about your journey to becoming vegan, Andrew, and about how your veganism impacts your spiritual life.
Well, veganism really grew out of my spiritual path and in meeting Thich Nhat Hanh. And they're so closely interwoven, I can't really separate the two of them. So for me, veganism is an integral part of spirituality, and spirituality is, supports my veganism. So the two are really related. I became a student of Thich Nhat Hanh back in 1991 at a retreat in California. And when you become a formal student of Thich Nhat Hanh, or when you become a formal student of his tradition, you're given a practice called the 5 mindfulness trainings, which is kind of a contemporary rendering of the 5 traditional Buddhist precepts, which are no killing, no stealing, no lying, no intoxicants, and no sexual immorality, I guess. And Thich Nhat Hanh, instead of having those be kind of rigid rules that we all need to obey, he puts it in the context as being a mindfulness training, that it's we never say, okay, I'm finished with that one. It's always something that we're practicing and doing our best to embody in our life. The first mindfulness training is on not killing. And it reads, I'm determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to support any act of killing in the world, in my thinking or in my way of life. And so even though I kind of took this particular practice on, for some reason I never equated it with what I was eating. I was thinking of, the physical act of, killing something at that time. So when I first became a student back in 1991, I did not become vegetarian or vegan. I became vegetarian about 10 years later. Thich Nhat Hanh actually came to Berkeley and gave a talk at the Berkeley Community Theater in 2001, just 2 days after September 11th. He came on September 13th and gave a public talk. And I, for one, was kind of thinking that he would give words that were really comforting. But what he did was, one of the things that he talked about in this talk was called one of the discourses of the Buddha, one of the teachings of the Buddha, called the Discourse of the Sun's Flesh. And this is a story that the Buddha taught about a man and a woman who and their young child who needed to flee a country. I guess it was unsafe and they needed to leave. And they brought food and set off, and they were crossing a desert. In the middle of the desert, they ran out of food and weren't sure what they were going to do. So the two of them decided that they would kill their son and kind of eat his flesh to continue the journey. Then the Buddha's students, were kind of incredulous at this story, wondering how could anyone be happy? How could anyone tolerate eating the flesh of their child? And the Buddha responded that if we're not mindful of how we consume, we are eating the flesh of our child. And then he put it in the context of eating meat. And basically he talked about, the environmental impacts of animal agriculture, and how it's, one of the biggest sources of, global climate change, ocean dead zones, use of water, use of land, and things like that, statistics that we're all aware of, and also the animal suffering. And, talked about our consumption as a species and how when we consume in this way, it's like eating the flesh of our child or of future generations. So he said that if we practice mindfulness, that we'll be able to see the violence in our food, and that the practice of mindfulness can help us to eat in a way that nourishes our compassion, basically. And it was at this talk I decided to stop eating meat, stop participating in the suffering of animal agriculture. And this was I think in 2001. And then like a year or so later, I was invited to a friend's house who lived in the country, and he found out that I'd never had tri-tip in my life, and he thought that was a big that I hadn't fully lived yet until I tried tri-tip, and kind of put me in one of those ethical situations. And I decided to be a gracious guest, and so I ate the tri-tip that he served. And during the meal, I felt really uncomfortable. And after the meal, I excused myself and went and sat outside. And when I went outside his house, there was a fence, and I guess his neighbor was a rancher. So as I was sitting there, and a cow came right up to the fence and started looking at me. And then another cow came and started looking at me. And slowly, it seems like the whole herd came over there. And I was sitting there looking at, probably 40 or 50 cows who were all just kind of staring at me. And I really had the feeling that they know what I just did. And so I talked to them and came over the fence and stroked them. And I told them that, I will never eat their kind again. And then it took me about another 8 years or so before I became vegan. And again, this was influence of Thich Nhat Hanh. I've been practicing vegetarian for a while, but still, with dairy, eggs. And Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a letter to his community which became known as the Blue Cliff Letter. I think it was written at one of his monasteries that's called the Blue Cliff Monastery. And I read this letter, and he talked about the importance of becoming vegetarian, but he said vegetarian means not consuming dairy or eggs or any animal products. And he said if we stop consuming, they will stop producing, and talked about how important it is that all of his students stop eating any kind of animal products. And so after reading that letter, I became vegan, and that was so that's kind of my journey of how I kind of slowly transitioned from eating meat to vegetarian and onto a vegan way of life. And it's been a path that's completely connected with my spiritual practice and my spiritual path.
Well, thank you so much for telling us about that. I've read, I imagine a lot of us have read a lot of things that Thich Nhat Hanh has written. He's been a huge influence in the vegan movement and showing the connection between veganism and spirituality. And that letter, the Blue Cliff Letter, was such a powerful thing. And I think a lot of people went vegan after that. But it must have been wonderful to study under him. Mm-hmm. And is he still giving talks at all?
He's not giving talks at this point. In 2015, he had a pretty big stroke, and he hasn't been able to speak since then. So he still often has a presence, at the monastery. When they had a summer retreat this past summer, I think, and he'll come in a wheelchair. His attendants will bring him in, and he'll sit and enjoy the teachings that are being given. But at this point, all the teachings are being given by the monks and nuns and senior students of the tradition.
I see. So people could go to the monasteries for retreats and that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh yeah, there's several monasteries here in the United States. Deer Park Monastery in San Diego. There's Blue Cliff Monastery up in New York. There's one in the South, and there's sanghas throughout the country. But then there's also some international ones. The main one is Plum Village, which is in France.
Plum Village. Okay. Thanks. So for anyone who wants to pursue that, there's some ideas. So another question, as we all know, animal activism can be traumatic and demanding. And so we often talk about that on these calls, and In Defense of Animals works hard to help people with the trauma and how to carry on. But did Thich Nhat Hanh discuss that, activism, as part of his teachings? And if so, did he have advice for us? And also, what advice would you have for us as activists to stay spiritually spiritually strong as we continue to work to bring liberation to all animals.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, Thich Nhat Hanh teaches that we definitely need to take care of ourselves and make sure that we are being nourished spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and that we're getting the nourishment we need to be able to be happy. And this includes activism. And when we cultivate the practice of mindfulness in our lives, we also, when you engage in the practice for a while, my experience is that it helps me to become less reactive to thoughts, emotions, and images, because the practice is really, our mind keeps straying off in one direction or the other, or feelings come and go. But if you just kind of let them go and come back to your breath, it's like the thoughts and feelings are still there, but you learn to create some space between your awareness and thoughts, feelings, and images, and you become less reactive to them. You can become less traumatized. So with animal activism, we see a lot of traumatic images for those who go into, the factory farming places and slaughterhouses and things like that. You're taking in a lot of traumatic images, and a meditation practice, it's not going to necessarily make those images go away, but it kind of, I think it would help be less reactive to those images, and help with coping with those images a little bit more. I've also, what I think I've noticed is that there's kind of a psychological dimension among activists where it's like we don't want those images to go away. We don't want to lose touch with the suffering of animals, that we want to feel the suffering of the animals and be moved by that suffering. And it's that being moved by suffering that gives us the inspiration to take action. And, that's a real beautiful expression of compassion. But at some point we can become overwhelmed. We can become overwhelmed with traumatic images. We can be overcome with kind of negative emotions. We can be overcome with anger and feelings of despair. And, if we allow ourselves to take in images and these things beyond our capacity, I think they can become toxins. And Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this, that, if we take in images and engage in thoughts and emotions that overwhelm us, then we're not really in a position of bringing more peace and compassion to the world, because our inner state is negative. So we have to be peace ourselves in order to bring peace in the world. So it's kind of a both and. So often I think he would suggest, and this is what I do, is if I notice that I'm getting overwhelmed with kind of despair and feeling depressed, and I will take breaks. Sometimes I take what I call news fasts, where I have to stop paying attention to the news for a while, which is just telling me everything that's going wrong in the world. And if my watching the news somehow changed the world, I might continue watching, for the benefit of the world, but it doesn't seem to matter whether I'm watching or not. So I found that sometimes I need to take breaks for a while, and sometimes I need to take a break from being exposed to disturbing images, and learn how to transform my own suffering, attend to the suffering that's within, before I then re-engage with the suffering in the world. So it's kind of a process of basically tending suffering, tending our own suffering, and tending the suffering in the world, and learning to transform suffering. And what I found is over time, my capacity to be with suffering increases. So, it starts off with I have a certain level of being able to be present with suffering, and then I'll find what my limit is, and then I need to kind of work on transforming my own suffering. And then I can re-engage the world of suffering again, whatever kind of suffering that is. And if I start feeling overwhelmed, again, really focus on transforming my own suffering, but finding that over and over in this process that I'm able to be with suffering, my capacity for being with suffering continues to increase, because it's kind of building your compassion muscles and the muscles of being able to be with suffering. Something else that Thich Nhat Hanh really focuses on is community, the importance of community. He talks about the importance of spiritual community, but he also talks about, I think any kind of community that gives us support. So in defense of animals and other, communities that are doing this work, being a part of a community, we can support each other, encourage each other as we do our best to relieve suffering within ourselves and suffering in the world. And also, if we feel that I need to take a break for a little while to work on transforming my own suffering, because you're feeling like you're too filled with negativity and traumatic images and things like that, that if you need to take a break, that there's a whole community that's carrying on the work, and that you can kind of step away and rejoin. So it's kind of a process like that, I would say. But it's important to not be doing this work alone. I think Thich Nhat Hanh would definitely say that we can't do this work alone. We need to do it in community, and we need to be supporting each other.
My gosh, you said that all so well. I'm taking notes here, and we do have a recording, so we can all watch this again. But the way you described increasing our capacity to be present with suffering, and then to take care of ourselves, and also what you said about knowing that other people are carrying on the work, but we can take a break when we need to. That's just so wonderful to hear all that.
Yeah, it's more of a marathon than a sprint. So we need to take care of ourselves so we can be in it for the long haul and not, just burn out and fizzle out, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And the animals can't afford for us to burn out. So
right.
Really have to take care of ourselves. So tell us, you're also real involved with Dharma Voices for Animals, and they're doing wonderful work. So tell us about your relationship with them, what some of your projects are there, and a little side question is the Dalai Lama any closer to becoming vegan?
So I don't forget to answer the question about the Dalai Lama. I'll answer that first, and my answer is I don't know. I thought to look into. I think about looking into that every once in a while. As far as I know, he's still eating meat. I think it's like every other day that his doctors recommend that he eats meat, and we probably have a variety of feelings about that. Personally, personally, I think he should be vegan. So, but he certainly teaches about the need for compassion for all living beings, and he seems to be doing what he feels is his capacity to do that. And I don't know, what the reasons are that he feels and that his doctor feels he needs to eat meat. So I really can't comment on that. But as far as I know, he's still eating meat. And as far as the work with Dharma Voices for Animals, Dharma Voices for Animals is doing a lot of really exciting and important work. It's the only Buddhist animal rights organization in the world, and globally there's estimated to be over 1 billion Buddhists, mostly living in Asia. And Dharma Voices for Animals is an international organization, so there's I think 26 was the last count. There's been some new chapters forming. I hear about them every couple months. It seems like there's more chapters forming, but I think there's 26. There's several in Asia, in Europe, United States, Australia, and in Canada. And in Buddhism, there's the teachings of the Buddha on eating animals is pretty straightforward. That we're not to eat. Followers of the Buddha are not to eat animals. And in some traditions, like the Theravada tradition, there's certain, which was really a monastic tradition, there was some flexibility because monks basically owned nothing and they didn't prepare their own food. They had a begging bowl and they went out in the community with their bowl, and they're trained to basically accept whatever is given. But certainly if they found out that an animal was killed for them, they couldn't eat that because they didn't want people giving them meat that was specially killed for them. They didn't want to encourage that. So it's a little more subtle in the Theravada tradition, but certainly in the Mahayana tradition, all the Buddhist teachings are very clear that followers of the Buddha are not to eat meat or consume any animal products, and yet a lot of Buddhists do. I know, for example, in Tibetan Buddhism, the Dalai Lama is from Tibet, of course. It's traditionally for most of Tibet's history, you can't grow vegetables in Tibet. So I think eating animal products was seen as really important for survival. But of course, that's changed now. And in Tibet, my understanding in talking with a Tibetan Lama, several Tibetan Lamas actually, is that meat alternatives and tofu is readily available throughout Tibet. But there still tends to be eating of meat among Tibetan Buddhists and among American Buddhists who are enjoying practicing meditating, but they're not necessarily following the ethical teachings of Buddhism. And so there is meat eating, as it turns out, in Tibetan groups. And one time I went to a Tibetan gathering, and there was a potluck, and I was thinking in my mind that this was a vegetarian organization. I was eating a dish, and I realized that this had bacon in it. And so I talked with the people who were in charge and let them know how upsetting that was to me, and engaged in a conversation about eating meat. So the approach to Dharma Voices in Animals is really, Dharma Voices of Animals is made up of people who are members of the Buddhist community. And if we're participating in a community and we notice that there's eating of animals or mistreatment of animals in any way, that we speak up and we start a conversation. So the most important thing is starting a conversation about things and really encouraging them to take steps to, if they're eating meat, to go vegetarian. If they're vegetarian, but some are vegetarian and still will serve, cheese and dairy or eggs, encouraging them to, cut those out of what they're doing and really be kind of the voice of animals in the Buddhist community. One of the things Dharma Voices of Animals did was several years ago, they created a film called Animals and the Buddha. And this film was made by Keegan Kuhn, who also did the film Cowspiracy, and recently What the Health, which is a really great movie that came out recently. So he was involved in making Animals in the Buddha. And this is available for just to watch at the Dharma Voices of Animals website. And it's been translated into, I think, 10 different languages. And what I've been doing in my local chapter is going to different Buddhist temples. And in San Jose, where I live, there's a large Vietnamese community, and there's many, many Vietnamese temples. And I have a good Dharma sister friend who is really well connected in the Vietnamese Buddhist community, who will introduce me to a particular temple and go to the temple to show the movie Animals and the Buddha, and then have a conversation about animal welfare with the people at the temple. I find that in the Vietnamese community, however, there's a lot. In fact, all of the temples I'm aware of are already vegetarian. Some do still serve eggs and dairy, though, so there's always room to grow. Dharma Voices of Animals also, they have a real active chapter in Sri Lanka that's introduced and is really advocating that the Sri Lankan government adopt what would be the country's first animal welfare bill. We've started a petition and have been really advocating the king of Bhutan. Bhutan's still a kingdom. In order to help grow their economy, they're planning on starting, I think, 10 meat processing plants. Right now, they don't have any slaughterhouses or meat processing plants in the country at all, and they're thinking of going in that direction. So we're really trying to leverage the Buddhist community there to put pressure on the government to not go in that direction, and that there's a lot more wholesome ways to improve their economy. So those are kind of overview of what Dharma Voices of Animals has been up to in the projects we're doing.
Yeah, it's just a wonderful group. It's getting so much done and offering a lot of resources for people, any other vegan Buddhists out there that are listening in. Go to that website, and there will be lots of ideas of things to do to reach out to Buddhist communities that you know about that are still either eating meat or eggs and dairy. So also you're involved in so many things, but the Silicon Valley Interreligious Council, and you had told me earlier that they are not a vegan group, but have you had any luck trying to have a vegan potluck with them or anything like that? Or are they real resistant?
Well, so I came to learn about the Silicon Valley Interreligious Council. I was organizing an annual memorial service for homeless people and inviting religious leaders from different traditions. I wanted it to be faith-based, but interfaith, as a way of bearing witness to the reality that people are dying on the streets of in our city and county and across the country. And we focused on reading the names of the people that died here in San Jose. And last year it was over 100 names. But through my organizing that, I met the folks from the Silicon Valley Interreligious Council, and they also really helped me network with the religious community. And as far as veganism, it's not really, well, actually, we did have basically the way it's organized is, one of the activities that we do ongoing is almost every month we have a forum that everyone participates in, and different communities will say, our community will host the forum this month, and we're going to do it on this topic, and then invites all of the religious leaders and faith communities that are connected with the Interreligious Council to come participate. And there was one on the ethics of meat, and it was really led by Buddhist. It was Buddhist, Hindu, Jain, and Sikh leaders were there to present diet in their traditions. And so that event was vegan. And for events that are held at the Buddhist organizations, they've all been vegan. At Hindu and certainly the Jains, I think all the Jain community is very strongly vegan. Everything is vegan. But then there's when we go to other faith communities, mostly in the Abrahamic traditions, I would say, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, their veganism is not really a part of the culture of those traditions, and so they will eat, serve meat at those traditions, although they've always served, a vegetarian or vegan option to be sensitive to others. So, it's kind of like a gentle nudging. I know we had an event at one place, and one of the Hindu leaders, who also runs a farmed animal sanctuary called Priti Rang, which is in Northern California. She was asking them why these meals aren't vegan, and so there's it's maybe a little bit on the radar screen, but it's really a collection of leaders from different traditions, and whoever's hosting a particular event, it's kind of however they want to do it. So plenty of work to do to keep conversation and keep animal welfare on the radar screen, because it's always kind of frustrating to me when the welfare of animals doesn't appear to be part of the area of concern of different religious traditions, because it should be.
Sure, yeah. We've got a lot of work to do there. And that's actually one of the things our Interfaith Vegan Coalition is working on. So we probably ought to open for questions, but before we do, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to discuss before we open for questions?
I would only share that I've really found my involvement in the animal welfare movement and the vegan movement to really be supportive of my spiritual path. And just for example, recently I came across video footage from Direct Action Everywhere, video footage of saving a piglet that became named Lily from Circle 4 Farms, which is a supplier to Costco, and also video footage of them going in and saving a hen named May, I think it was named. They named this hen, her name is May, at a so-called certified humane farm that supplies Whole Foods. And as I saw, these, I think, pretty courageous people and compassionate people enter these hellish places where the animals are raised and saving who they could, I was really reminded of, that it struck me that this is bodhisattva activity. In the Buddhist tradition, bodhisattvas are awakened beings that are devoting themselves to relieving the suffering of others. And there's even a bodhisattva that vowed to always go into the hell realms and to save beings from hell. And I really see this open rescue work and as a bodhisattva activity. And to me, the two are really closely connected. And I was really moved in watching these videos and just seeing bodhisattvas in action, devoting themselves to rescuing beings from the hells that we create.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Well, Lisa, shall we open up for questions?
Sure, let's do it.
Yes, let's go ahead and do that. Thank you so much. I'm going to change the video view. So for those of us who, if you'd like to tune in via webcam, you're welcome to do that. And if you'd like to ask your question, you can turn your audio on through the webcam. And the other request I would ask is please join us if you're asking a question. And if you're not, if there are some background noises, I may mute you. It's nothing personal. We do have a question to start off with in our chat box, so I'll go ahead and add that one. It's from Amy, and she asks, she says she used to meditate in San Francisco with San Francisco Urban Dharma, and she was told that her questions and comments about veganism were not welcome. The teacher was a carnist and recently had a barbecue picnic, and she was told she would be removed from their Facebook page if she continued to ask about it. Are there any suggestions other than completely walking away? Perhaps maybe other teachers like you, Andrew, can reach out to the Dharma Punks Sangha, as they're very popular and very carnist.
Well, I think it really varies from chapter to chapter. I just recently started connecting with Dharma Punks community here in San Jose, which is led by a Theravada nun, Santusika, and I know that she's vegan and is very supportive of veganism. So I can't say that the Dharma Punks movement overall is necessarily carnist or vegan. I think it probably depends on who the teacher is. With that particular teacher, that sounds really horrific and discouraging. And, that's kind of one of the main focuses of Dharma Voices for animals is, we have an eyes and ears program. And, for any Buddhists who attend a Buddhist event or a temple or a meditation group where they're supporting the eating of meat or supporting harm to animals in any way, to contact Dharma Voices for Animals, and our organization will contact that teacher and engage in a polite but serious dialogue about their practices. It sounds like this particular community, the teacher is not only not sympathetic, but very closed to being in conversation. So, can't necessarily change others. And so, for me, I might be looking for a different community but it's really up to you if you feel that community overall is supporting your spiritual practice and that there's still benefit in practicing with that community, in spite of their carnist tendencies, then, you might continue practicing with them. But if that's too big of a barrier, there's probably other Buddhist communities who would be much more understanding about that. But thank you, Amy. And sounds like a really crappy experience.
Yeah. Let's see. In our chat box, we have another question. And this one is, Andrew, thank you for your advocacy. What activist methods do you think are the most effective? Leafleting or something else? And this is coming from Losang. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. And I think that, the way that Thich Nhat Hanh teaches on this and is the way that I've come to see is most helpful, and that is our life is our message. So, if through our spiritual practice, we're able to really embody a peacefulness, not like peaceful that we're afraid of conflict, but an inner peace. And, if we're radiating compassion and kindness, that, we're going to be the message. And so what particular method isn't as important as who we are as a person and how we're, how we're living our life. So I'd say the most important thing is to, whatever spiritual path you're on, is to really work it. If you're not on a spiritual path, then, there's other ways to really, cultivate, peace in your heart and compassion, and to just radiate that compassion out into the world and trust that whatever you're doing is going to be effective. And because I think if we're filled with more negative emotions, or if we're, feeling more overwhelmed, and, we're kind of radiating, anger and despair and things like that, no matter what method we're doing, people are going to feel that energy and they're going to probably be turned off by whatever we're doing. But if we're radiating compassion and peace, I think whatever we're doing is going to help. So I think that's how I'd answer that question.
Thank you so much for responding to that question. I also wanted to let folks know that if you are struggling with some of those feelings of anger, overwhelm, or frustration, In Defense of Animals has an activist support line. You're welcome to call us. Anytime we're available. We have free counseling to talk to folks and help to transform that, what we're calling negative energy, into a more positive form, where we can then radiate that peace and that positivity and love for the animals and for all beings. So you're welcome to reach out to us at 800-705-0425. So let's see if there's anyone else have a question. It looks like Todd has a question. Do you have any close friends or family members that are not vegan? And if so, how has that affected your interaction with them?
Oh, yes. I have many friends and colleagues who aren't vegan. My wife is vegan, and my son, who's 17, is not. We're vegan in our house, and I'm make sure that he's fully aware of where meat comes from, and he is a really sensitive soul, and he's the kind of boy who's, if he accidentally drowns a little tiny flying insect in the bathtub, he used to cry over that kind of thing. He's 17 now and still has that compassionate heart, but he's still, like, when he goes to his friend's house, he says, if they serve pizza, I'm going to have pizza. And so, I don't shame him. I'll remind him, where that cheese comes from, and just so he doesn't forget. Because part of, I guess, as a Buddhist, the word Buddha actually means the awakened one. So it's about waking up to reality. So it's all about trying to be really aware of what's real. And so I'm making sure that he's aware of where that food comes from. And that's been an ongoing practice, is encouraging him in his life when he's not eating at home. But also in my workplace, I work at the hospital, and I actually work for a hospital system that's a real strong advocate for plant-based diets. I work with Kaiser Hospital here in San Jose, but Kaiser in general, they starting in September, they have a program, a 30-day challenge to go completely plant-based for a whole month for all of the staff. It's geared towards the doctors, nurses, and all the workers at Kaiser. I went to my doctor's office, and my doctor has literature on, like, forks over knives. One of my doctors had a poster on the door for, what was it? It was What the Health was encouraging their patients to see What the Health and advocating plant-based diets. So, but there's a lot of people that I work with who aren't. And, one of the nurses I work really closely with is won't, even when we have potlucks and I bring, vegetarian food, he won't even taste it. He's very fearful of eating something that's not meat. And so we have kind of a constant, every time I eat my lunch at work with my colleagues every day, and there's always some friendly discussion, but I'm always encouraging them, but trying to strike that balance that these are people I have to work with, so being respectful but keeping the conversation alive, and I'm finding that for me that's most helpful. With family, same thing. My dad, who lives in the Chicago area, when we call, we talk to each other every week, and we've got a really loving, good relationship with him. But he always likes to tell me what he ate that day. He went down to the dining hall at the assisted living facility that he lives at, and he'll tell me about all the meat he ate. And I've asked him to just to spare me the menu report, and encourage him to try tofu and things like that. But it's difficult. But I've found that again, it's about who I am as a person, and trying to be someone who embodies compassion and understanding and has respectful conversations about these things. But personally, I try not to speak words that are coming from a place of anger or shame, because I don't think those are helpful, or won't motivate change, and they don't feel good either.
So thank you for answering that question. And we are coming towards the end of our gathering. There's one other question I thought I'd share with you, which is, how do we, when we do take a break from our activism, like you suggested, Janie asked this, how to deal with the guilt that we feel if we do take a break?
Well, that's a really deep question. A good question. For me, I just look at the big picture, that the fact that you're might be needing to take a break does not mean that you're not compassionate and that you're not devoting your life to relieving the suffering of animals, but it's doing what you need to do to make sure that you're in this for the long haul, that if you don't take care of yourself, that you're going to be more limited in your activism and advocacy. So I really see as taking these breaks and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, that's a way of practicing compassion for the animals, because we need to be healthy and in a good place of mind and emotion in order to be more effective in the work. So to me, it's part of compassion for animals. It's part of the practice of animal advocacy, is to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. And hopefully, if you look at it that way, you won't feel guilt, but you'll be happy that you're doing what you need to do to take care of yourself, so you can make this a lifelong practice of compassion.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I think your answers are right on. I mean, here we are taking it all in, and I'm so grateful to you for being part of our online gathering and sharing your wisdom with us. And although it's time for all of us to move on to the next task in our day, I do want to invite folks to join us again for the next online gathering that we have, which we offer them on the second Thursday of every month, and they're always at the same time. So if you tuned in, on the West Coast, it's 5 p.m., and on the East Coast, it's 8 p.m. I just want to close with just a sense of gratitude. Maybe we could all take a deep breath, and as we breathe into our hearts, breathe in gratitude and exhale that sense of gratitude out to the world, to our teachers, to Andrew for sharing his wisdom with us this evening. And as you breathe in and out, allowing that sense of gratitude to take home, become a home in your heart. Also, send out this amazing feeling to Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a world leader that we are all very fortunate to be walking on this planet with, as he says, peace with every step. So many thanks and gratitude from all of us to you and to your teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. And thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. We really appreciate this opportunity to be together in a group. And this is how we cultivate our compassion, is by talking about it, by sharing the resources that we have with one another, and by continuing to explore veganism as a spiritual path. Thanks to everyone, and have a beautiful evening.
Lisa,
Yeah.
Andrew had a special thing he was going to do at the end. Was it a song, Andrew?
Oh, yeah. If there's time, I could share a short practice song.
It wouldn't take long, and it just sounded wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Sure.
And we need everybody to be unmuted, is that right? So everybody can repeat what you say?
Yeah. In Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition, we have practice songs that we share. And this particular one that I thought I'd share is from the teaching called the Two Promises. And when children, usually children of parents who are students of Thich Nhat Hanh, but when children say they want to join this path and practice in Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition and the Buddha's path, they take two promises. I vow to develop my understanding in order to live peacefully with people, animals, plants, and minerals. And I vow to develop my compassion in order to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. And sometimes, for a while, I wondered why minerals. I mean, I can see protecting people, animals, and plants, but I was puzzled by protecting minerals or living peacefully with minerals. But then I heard a teaching that Thich Nhat Hanh gave where he said that every living being is made of, non-living parts also. Like for me as a human, I'm completely made of non-human elements, including minerals. So you really can't make a distinction between animate and inanimate, that it's all interconnected. So I think that's, if anyone's wondering why minerals, I think that's how I'd view it, that we're interrelated with everything in the cosmos, everything on the earth certainly, and so we want to honor the minerals as well. But I could lead this song, and if you're all unmuted, I'd like to try to sing this together, and we can do it call and response. I'll sing one, and you can just repeat after me. That sound okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it goes. I vow to develop understanding. I'll repeat.
I vow to develop understanding
in order to live peacefully with people, animals, plants, and minerals.
In order to live peaceful with people, plants, and minerals.
I vow to develop my compassion.
I vow to develop my compassion
in order to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. In order to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. Thank you.
Great.
Oh, so beautiful. Thanks to everyone for joining in. And thank you, Andrew, for bringing this lovely song to us.
Yeah,
we're so grateful to you.
Wonderful.
And gratitude to Thich Nhat Hanh and the whole Sangha for creating this path.
Beautiful. May you all have a lovely evening, and thank you for joining in our group tonight. Be well.
Thank you.
Be well. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Lisa. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.